Ladies and gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, hello, hello. It's a particularly noisy bunch at the back over there. Welcome back, hope you had a good break. We now go through to the disruption panel, followed by another set of roundtables, then the closing keynote. So we're in the second straight of the day. Our panel are all sitting there waiting for us, but before we turn to them, James Potton's going to tell us about the curve.
Great, thanks, Jim. So, hi everyone. So I'm James Potton. I've been working with the guys from the crowd on the curve for about the last three and a half months. So I thought we'd take an opportunity to let you know a little bit more about it today. As it's after the break, I thought it'd be quite nice just to have a little bit of fun. So, are we all up for that? Are we up for a bit of audience participation? It's going to be awkward, this one. So what I'd like you to do is shout what you see, okay? So first up, can. There's a can over there, so you guys win. So I'm going to do left-right kind of competition. So can. Curve, very good. Still a lot more noise coming from this side. No pressure. Very good, very good. It's about equal. Still more. I don't want to get political, but the far right over here have been much noisier. So I think, lefties, come on. Oh, yeah, for you. Well done, over there. Final one. Yeah, well done. I thought you'd never ask. So can the curve be a catalyst for the energy revolution, or cat-eye list? So what is the curve? So it's born out of the crowd's sort of realization that there's a sort of energy problem, or indeed a sort of a market failure potentially. I know there were some events sort of back in 2014, and this is a progression of those events. And we've heard some amazing sort of discussions earlier today from Mustafa and from the panel. And there's clearly huge improvements and movements in what's happening within energy. And basically, the curve is, we like to think of it as having the potential to have a significant contribution towards COP21 targets. So we aim to address the energy market failure. It's a business case exchange for energy projects and looking to accelerate good, sustainable practices. So for me personally, I actually believe we can create a better future through sharing. Now, I'm one of 7 siblings. I'm the youngest. If they weren't so kind as they were, then I don't think I'd be who I am today. Equally, with the mentors I've had in my life, they've helped me get to where I am. I kind of see the curve as a kind of mass mentoring program. So those that are out there understanding and pioneering what's going on are helping the others to accelerate the sustainability journey. Curve today, you're able to go on there, log on. You can join the other 96 companies that are currently using it. You can actually join, upload, and search projects. You're able to look through the database of 685 projects with over, depending on exchange rates, about £700 million worth of value in there. And you're able to do that both internally and externally with your, so you can actually do it within your company, so you can share some performance data, or you can do it externally with trade associations. And you're also able to look at the 131 rated suppliers. So we also have some Excel reporting with the great work that David and Tiff do. So it's still in its kind of rudimental form, but it's where we're going, I think, is interesting. So the curve tomorrow is looking to be the place you go where you first decide what, you're looking at energy project or you're looking at sustainability project, you're trying to work out whether you should do it or not. We're seeing the curve as somewhere that you go. that you then can compare that against the anonymized peer-rated projects and suppliers out there. So you can sort of see, whether what the payback is, and what the other co-benefits are, and so on, whether they are actually being met by other companies. So you get a bit of a feel there. You're also able to get some third-party funding quotes, so you're able to pull together a real business case of what someone else is willing to pay for the work that you're looking to get done. And our aim is to create a decision-making utopia. The clever bit that comes after that is to create the brain, actually, which is sort of where we start to pull all this information together. We see it as being a form of AI, effectively algorithms, to help basically advise you, so become a sustainability advisor. So you then feed back into your project ideas and allows you to, if you like, go round the loop and get better and better at the different projects and the different ideas that you're putting forward within your business. The 7 C's of the curves, so let's sell them. So I see confidence in decision making as being the primary kind of function of it. It helps you understand, to challenge your thought processes, and it allows you to use peer-generated data to really go with confidence to the board to then get commitment on a project. So you're able to use worked examples and to demonstrate what other people have done. So you're the critical thinking element in it, you're actually you're able to build a much stronger business case in doing so. Also, the potential for the cash flow. So when projects are only funded if they're within 1 year payback, you're able to get cash flow or access to cash flow up to 7 years with a lot of third-party funders. So even if you don't use it, it's really important to understand what that might look like, and why other people are interested. Third-party funders are interested in funding it. We see collaboration absolutely essential within it, so internal reporting and benchmarking, and external. Cutting edge, we talked about the pioneering element and all of the great work that's been discussed on the panel earlier today. So we're seeing those, and we've already had that example where we've had battery storage projects go into the curve, had huge generation of interest and people coming to see what the payback is and how it's going to potentially work as a project. So people can, a lot of energy advisors have used that to work with their clients. Certification, we're looking at working with a standardized ICP model. And finally, so carbon reduction, so future-facing, and trying to make that real impact on the world. So we have our pioneers here. You all recognize these people or these companies, and it'd be interesting to know if you're going to be next on our list. We've also got testimonials, and in the middle here, Caroline, you've done a lot of work with the curve, and you're happy for people to talk to you if they want to understand what it could do for them. And there's 7. 7's an interesting number for the curve. 7 is an important number from we were talking about the 7 C's earlier. We also aim to get payback, or projects with a payback of up to 7 years funded through the curve. It's an aim that we think is being missed at the moment because third-party funders are willing to do so. Over the next 7 weeks, we're hoping to generate lots more activity as we go out to try and raise the 1.5 mil to help the curve kind of brain and the AI bit come to life. It's taken me 7 minutes to introduce the curve to you, and it would take you 7 minutes to jump on, log on, and upload your first project. So we started by asking, can the curve be a catalyst for the energy revolution? We believe so. We hope you do too. Thank you. Over to Catherine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that very brief and eloquent introduction to the curve, which sets us up beautifully for our second panel today, which is looking at disruption. So this morning we discussed leadership and those companies taking leadership and moving from marginal gains to making very significant changes. And all of them alluded to the fact that they are ready for and actively preparing for disruption. And in this session now, we're going to talk to 4 contributors who can tell us in more detail about what they're doing in their companies to better prepare for the energy management disruption, which we see is with us and is only going to get bigger. So let's be better prepared for that now. I'd like to welcome first and foremost, in fact, Carlos Nasillo, who's the head of data science at RWE Innovation Hub, and the eagle-eyed amongst you will have looked at your program and realised that he is not Kate Jack. So thank you very much to Carlos for stepping in at the last minute.
That's all right. That's absolutely fine.
So you'll be coming at it from a slightly different, more data science-led perspective, but we're very, very grateful for you for stepping into the breach
That's
today.
absolutely fine.
And next to him, of course, we have John Elkington, who is the chief pollinator at Volans, and a familiar name and face to many of you at the crowd. He's a world-famous leader and innovator in this space, author of, I think, at least 19 books, and a real change agent. He named triple bottom line accounting many, many years ago, and is now increasingly focused on exponential thinking. So he'll be providing our closing keynote speech on that X factor, but we're very grateful to have him on the panel with us today. And next to him we have Agamemnon Otero, who's the CEO of Repowering, and that's a social enterprise with a new energy business model and providing a real challenge to energy. So we're very glad to have you on the panel today. And then last but by no means least, we have Ram Ramachandra, who's the Chief Digital Officer at Hitachi Europe, which is the bleeding edge of technologies like energy storage and demand-side responses and artificial intelligence. So very, very pleased to welcome those four speakers. I'm hoping in the next 45 minutes or so, we can cover off again another kind of big 4 or 5 buckets of ideas, where we look at both the direction of travel and what that has in store as a kind of opener. And then we think through, again, what are the technologies that are really going to help us to get there? What are the skills and attributes amongst the people that are going to help inform that change? And what should we be looking out for, looking ahead? Where should we be thinking? Where are the people? Where are the companies? And where are the risks? So I'd like to start first with Agamemnon, to invite you to tell us a little bit about what's the change that you're seeing from Repowering London, and what can that give us as an insight here to answer this question about being ready for disruption, please.
Thank you. I do feel quite honoured. I've read your books when I was in uni, and I think among all of you, we've really seen sort of a disquiet, not only in your organizations, a dissatisfaction in many of the sort of events like this that you go to, where you've heard it all before and you've seen it all before, and even in the sense of your customers are they're saying the same things. You've heard it all before. I don't know if I'm getting anything. I don't know if this is the right company for me. I'm not sure if I really want this. And what we do in Repowering is we set up community-owned renewable energy projects. We started out in social housing, and we worked our way, and now we're working with Transfer for London on the overground, but also with corporates. And what we're seeing is that there's a seismic shift, and you're on the cusp of it, and that is the consumer is about to have it is going to shift over to being the prosumer. But what does that actually mean? And in the real sense, what it means is that the individual who was always the problem that you were trying to sell something to and get something from has now has everything. They have a huge amount of wealth to spend with you. They can raise capital at unprecedented amounts. They can store energy in their homes. If they are collecting the data in their own home and utilizing who they're going to work with and who they're going to give that information to, they become an incredible asset. And what we've been trying to do with Repowering is to look at it not as, is how do you facilitate the consumer into being this prosumer? How do you facilitate them for all their needs? And that specifically is to give them equity in the organization. So on all the cooperatives, all the energy systems that we're setting up, whether it's energy efficiency or generation, we're giving them equity in that. We're saying if you have £50 or you have 50,000 or 5 million, you are part of this cooperative. And what's been amazing is the real buy-in. So we do education programs from 40 weeks for young people, and training programs and mentoring programs for adults around the finance, IT, technical, legal elements of these. But what we're really seeing is an incredible interest and a sense of worth and well-being. You know, I've seen a lot of slides, and I've seen a lot of organizations where their aim is to do better and to do good. And yet, at the end of the day, I think the seismic business shift is going to be the fact that individual people are ready to be involved in their products and they want to work with us, but we have to give them a bit more. And so the business model will now include I think I see the future including the individuals, and they'll have a lot more autonomy, and AI will only give the individual consumer more autonomy.
I love that, having been brought up from the age of 14 as an economist where you had a demand curve and a supply curve, and actually what you're talking about completely knocks that stool away, doesn't it? That's no longer a way of thinking about it, because you're not dividing into we have consumers of energy and we have suppliers of energy. You're saying actually this entire map is changing. So this is the seismic shift that you're illustrating. Aram, can I just invite you to say something about your experience from Hitachi Europe, please?
Yeah, I think I'll go back a few more years than that. I started in energy analytics about 10 years ago with Jim, as I remember, in those days. And things have shifted so much in that period now, and to a point where, you know, I was finding it difficult to really understand how my traditional perspective on energy efficiency would fit into the new paradigm. I think AI, there's two fundamental shifts that I've seen. One is around the new business models that are emerging in energy. I think distributed energy generation has fundamentally shifted, and renewable growth has fundamentally shifted the traditional view on energy generation and consumption with the concept of the prosumer, and the significant challenges that it brings to the traditional markets. You talk to most utilities today, they are hugely disrupted. They are struggling to understand which direction to travel. You know, we have the big four, now we have 44 energy companies in the UK, and that is causing, and I think that will continue to grow. We have local authorities now becoming energy companies, licensed energy companies to distribute energy. So fundamentally that whole business model is changing. The technological change that's occurring around that is it's making an energy system that's totally interconnected. So I used to look at the energy world inside the building and outside the building and distribution. Now all of that is completely interconnected from my point of view. Whether you have intelligent devices that are proliferating all across your buildings, that come with their own capability to make intelligent decisions, connected directly to generators, whereby essentially what you're going to do is, you don't need an energy efficiency strategy. Essentially what you're doing is you've got this totally interconnected world where generators are optimizing when they generate energy based on exact demand at a granular level. So that world is definitely coming, and the question now is around how quickly we adapt to that change and how well we effectively adapt to that change.
Absolutely. So Carlos, as head of data science in an incumbent energy company that's really trying to embrace this disruption, what's that looking like for you?
So that's a very interesting approach, right? So Innogy started as part of RWE in fossil fuels. We changed to renewables. We want to take care of the planet, but we realized in order to carry on doing that, we needed to really change our business model, right? Even if we wanted to remain an energy company in renewables, we wouldn't manage to survive for maybe another 20, 25 years. So we realized that innovation had to come within, and it had to come at the borders of the company. And we took a very technology-driven approach. So I guess it's part to what Ram mentions, to making sure AI, machine learning, and kind of taking a data-driven approach where we found value and new business models based on things that we were doing existing in our existing business. For example, doing software for wind turbine optimization, for grid optimizations, smart meter on the houses, energy aggregation and disaggregation. So although we had all that data, we started to figure out there is better ways that we can learn how you use your house, how this building is used, and maybe optimize the energy delivery and the energy usage. So if nobody's here, maybe crank the AC down or stuff like that. That massively helps, not just in delivering that vision, but actually in making sure different companies, somebody like the Curve, helping out those interconnecting dots to make sure that we together as one whole can get to that point. And I think technology, machine learning, and AI, at least at Innogy, has been key for that. One of the best examples that we have currently is an internal startup that has become a company by its own, and it's called UCare. And what they do is amazing. Is they take these drones and they fly it across solar farms and houses, and they actually use heat sensors to actually detect when a PV panel is underperforming. And what they realize is that not just is about being able to produce green energy, but it's also about making sure that this distributed production of energy remains sustainable in the long run, and kind of creating the peripherals around it so that peer-to-peer energy can continue to function. And I think Innogy has taken I would say a very courageous approach to doing that. I'm very happy.
Yes, it's interesting, this need to take courage came up in earlier leadership panel, recognising that this is a time where recognising what's coming is the smart and brave thing to do, because if you don't, then you're going to be in a very difficult position. And John, you have the benefit of many years of overview across a number of companies, and you've just published a report on business innovation, and you've talked about the X in exponential, and indeed we've got the X energy here. So would you like to just share some of your insights from that?
Well, it's funny. I was listening to the other panelists about prosumer, and I was thinking back. The person who I think coined the word prosumer was Alvin Toffler in his 1980 book, The Third Wave. And just recently, I went back and was rereading it. It's amazing how even then, so a human generation ago, the Tofflers, he and his wife Heidi, were already predicting much of what we're currently going through. To see your point, one of the problems with living in a space like this for quite a while is you start to see those recurrent patterns. And what the Tofflers were talking about was a third industrial wave. And I didn't start economics when I was 14, as you did, Catherine.
To my shame.
No, I mean, it's a wonderful discipline if done well. But in 1968, I was at university, notionally, in fact, a university you're linked to, doing economics. And I decided to give it up because economics seemed to have absolutely bugger all, to put it mildly, to do with the wider world and the change that we were then going through. So every so often, these waves of disruption come through our economies and through our societies. And they come at different levels and different strengths and so on. And every so often you get something like a seventh wave out in the oceans, which is a humongous one. Well, I think we're in the very early stages of a humongous one, because our economies are about to be disrupted. They are being disrupted. Our societies with social media and many other things are being disrupted. Politics, I mean, you're seeing the disintermediation of politicians. So, it's very easy to talk about disruption. It's very easy to put the letter X up here and think we know what the hell we're talking about. Genuinely, we don't. I think in 20 to 30 years from now, we'll look back at this period in our collective history and see that energy was an absolutely crucial part of it, but so much else was changing at the same time. So we're trying to solve a multifactorial equation on the fly. And just a final point, when I left economics, there were two economists who lived on in my brain, both of them wildly unpopular at the time. One was Nikolai Kondratiev, the other was Joseph Schumpeter, both of them talking about the same thing. These long wave economic cycles that periodically come along and melt the world around us. So that's where we are. That's the challenge. The positive piece is that if you know what you're trying to do and you have some broad sense of how to do it, times like these are the times when you can drive change far faster, far further than in normal times. So at some level, my brain is quite excited. But my own industry is about to be disrupted as well, and I hear we're going to all be replaced by robots and machine learning anyway. So back to you, Catherine.
So let's ride that wave. That's why we're here today, isn't it? That we want to be able to ride that wave successfully, and it's a big seventh wave. So how best can we do that? And breaking down in this panel today, in this disruption panel, thinking through one of the next things is let's look at the technology enablers before we get to the people and the skills and the other factors. So this second question back to the panel is to think through, now that we know we're in this, what are the technologies that companies should be most seeking after, most preoccupied with, most prioritizing in order for that technology to be an enabler of that change, so that you help to ride the wave in that way? And Ram, I'd like to put that question out to you first, please.
Yeah, I think, I run an incubation business within Hitachi, which is around innovation. And Hitachi used the term social innovation. So they look 10, 20 years ahead in terms of their thought process around how does technology impact fundamental issues. So the idea for me is not really to look at technology for the sake of technology, rather than really look at the problems, the social problems that we're trying to address. And in the case of energy, we looked at where is the fundamental issue that's occurring around the growth of renewables. So we looked at Germany as an example to say, look, 36% of the German energy comes from renewables growth. What has been the disruptive impact on the German economy, the utility sector, the entire value chain around that area. And we started to look at what are the fundamental problems that's causing utility companies or consumers, etc. So one of the things that we found was that the growth of renewables caused significant volatility on the grid, as well as volatility in energy prices, which RWE all know very well. And what we then focused around is how do we make distributed generation assets perform more efficiently based around the 7 trading markets that exist in Germany. So traditionally what you tend to do is you generate a lot of energy, you meet your obligation, and then whatever's left you trade onto the market. That's been the traditional pattern of behavior around generation and trading, and two of these parties don't really talk to each other essentially. And what we've done is looked at understanding the asset. It's very similar to the stuff that Mustafa was talking about around what they did in the data center, is I understand the sort of configuration of the asset, the flexibility that it provides, understand the market trends in the 7 markets that exist within Germany, look at weather conditions, because the thing that really affects the price in the energy in Germany is weather, and put all of that data together and use AI algorithms to be able to steer the generation engine much closer to the economic trend, so you're actually steering a passive asset much more effectively around what the trading opportunities are. What that essentially does is improves the profitability of the utility. So the reason I gave that very long example is we just looked at the business problem. You know, the technology is there for us to be able to solve it, and across the entire energy value chain, there are fundamental inefficiency problems all the way through that we need to address. I think, you know, so what sort of technologies? Well, you know, it will be the same. You know, AI, big data analytics, and IoT, that's fine. But it's how you put that together and how you focus yourself, very rifle shot focus on the problem itself. That's key.
So harnessing first, so that then you can think through what the options are and how you optimize from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Carlos, I can see you smiling and nodding through some of that as part of your lived experience. Would you like to share some of that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, John mentioned patterns, and we have a pattern right here. So Rami is talking about 20, 25 years innovation. Within Energy, we call that Horizon 3, which is just a fancy word for saying 20 years on the line. So what we actually do is that we have kind of a two-pronged approach. So we have an internal accelerator in which we as a company try to find innovations and areas of optimization. And then we have an external acceleration process in which we call the Energy Accelerator. So any company that has an idea, wants to some sort of investment, and is within the space, we kind of give them access to all of the knowledge base, all of the infrastructure, and all of the contacts that Energy has in order to push that forward. So I think that would be the first kind of step around innovation and technology playing a part of it. But I think I will kind of take the other side, and I will take maybe the technological mindset to it. And one of the big hurdles that we had to go across Energy was that we didn't even have the infrastructure to deploy artificial intelligence models, collect data sets from these distributed systems. And it was a massive, massive, massive task that we had to undertake. First of all, starting from the infrastructure, the technology, the tool, the databases, everything that we needed to have in place in order to actually be able to start leveraging this information being produced. The next step was actually gathering the necessary skills, data scientists, data analysts, developers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, making sure that we had the people that knew what to do with the information that we had at hand. And from then we started kind of taking a very agile approach to innovation. So we did things like commercial imbalance, which is what Rami is talking about the energy production that we had using predictive maintenance, using predictive downtime, using weather prediction, and actually even using decentralized prediction, so based on the weather of particular areas that are heavily populated with solar panels in houses that eventually get feedback to the grid. So we could actually start to leverage that in advance, knowing, okay, it's going to be sunny, let's say in Reading, so we're going to get less generation there. Let's take a step ahead of time to avoid trading fines, for instance. Now, it would be naive to think that right now energy companies are focusing on trading profits. I think that is important, but more important for us is actually try to find out what are we going to trade in 20 years' time. So I think that's where it comes to technology and actually making sure that we have all that infrastructure to be able to leverage it. Different approaches, things like storage, generation, smart meters, IoT, smart chargers. So another project within Energy is being able to access car chargers, electric chargers as a service. So you subscribe to a service and then you have access to all of the chargers across Germany, for instance.
So there's a lot of things that you're alluding to there, partly about the use of the technology, but the application of the technology and the time horizon that you're thinking about that in. So Agamemnon, can I ask you to pick up on those points from your perspective?
Yeah, I sort of began smiling at it because I was thinking that both of these are solutions from incumbents as opposed to solutions from the other way. So effectively, I would promote, and I think that the real solutions here will be, how do you create an iterative response? So the user, how do you have that user interface on your demand side response? So if I'm aggregating a tower block, next door, and I have 500 people that live there, how do we make them take that data that they're getting and then make it more efficient for all of us so that when we buy and sell our energy, it works? I mean, consistently we come up with an idea which we can then provide to what we think the consumer is needing. But so much of the time, they are sitting in their homes and they would change their behavior if they were given incentives. So we talk about iterations on legal documents, and we know we have to go back to the lawyer many times, but we never do that with the consumer. You might talk about being in Marks and Spencer's over here, and you say, well, we got the coin, we put it in, we know where they want to go. That little green coin, you say, we know where everything's going to go to. But actually, is that enough? Is there not a data point in the thing saying, are the right things on the shelf? Do you get annoyed with me putting these things on the shelf, even though I know you don't want those things? Do you get annoyed walking through that extra bit of, do I want those? The question is when you ask those questions to people, they come up with solutions. Go, actually, I do want more healthy things to be given to me on my walk. And I think that's the same thing with the energy world. People want to be included in the decision-making process. They love the idea of aggregating the tower block. They love the idea of coming together as a bunch. And I think we need to flip that mindset and sort of this. What does that mean to be consumer to prosumer? It means allowing this person who's using this energy to be able to communicate back up. So when you talk about digital platforms, you talk about the ease of use, but also the accessibility of the iterative process on your technology.
And what you're talking about there plays right into the sort of next question that we could segue into now, which is whether or not we need different approaches to the mindset and the skill set for this disruption that is arriving in the energy sector, and how helpful that is and how important it would be to ensure that these things happen, that it's not just about the enabling technology. So John, can I ask you, you've spoken to a lot of energy experts in big business today, and you've got some very interesting insights in that. Could you share those, please?
Woof. Quite some years ago, I visited Intel in Portland and Oregon, and the woman who was running what they called, I think, their security fabric business was telling us that in any 1 year, this is probably 5 or 6 years ago, infrastructures, smart infrastructures, smart buildings, smart systems of all sorts in the United States were being hacked at least 40%. 40% of the infrastructure, smart buildings and so on, were being hacked. We've just recently seen the denial of service attacks in the United States using dumb devices in homes and so on. Even light bulbs and so on will be used in this way. So I'm, on the one hand, immensely excited about the technology that we're using left, right, and center. I think it has amazing potential for the sustainability agenda writ large, but equally I think it has blind sides, and one of the things I'd love to hear perhaps later, but the panel's views on, is how we best deal with that, because I quite often try and push people back to a guy called Tom Midgley. Some of you will have heard of him. He was a General Motors and DuPont scientist, brilliant, 100 patents to his name. He came up with 3 things. One was, that I stick in my memory, one was CFCs, thank you very much, stratospheric ozone hole. Leaded gasoline, which at the time was a wonderful anti-knock breakthrough innovation, but gave us huge, great sort of neurological problems in children. And the third thing, he sadly contracted polio, and in the 1940s built himself a sort of a semi-robotic bed, which ended up strangling him. And I used that very simple story to make the point that whatever we think we're doing, we're in the process of creating a system that will be helpful for much of the time, I'm sure, but actually deeply problematic in different ways, unless and until we engage. And I think just a quick point, I think one of the things that really spooks me at the moment If you talk to sustainability people, professionals, activists around the world, you will find them mainly focused back on technologies and industries that came up in earlier eras of our economic evolution. So it's still oil, and it's still chemicals, and it's still the automotive sector, and so on. At exactly the time, we've got AI, machine learning, big data, drones, synthetic biology, geoengineering. You know, I was with PA a couple of weeks ago, and they just did a list of some of the big technological changes that are coming at us now. And I just ran mentally down that list and tried to think, who in the sustainability world is engaging those people now at the formative moment? And I think the answer is precariously few of us as yet, although that interest is building. So I think it's an immensely exciting time, but by God, we've got to pay attention and get involved in different ways. And those denial of service attacks, I think, are just the precursor of shocks, which we'll recognize after the event, but are very difficult to see coming until they hit you.
Well, they're a very early indication, aren't they, of some of the risks and the vulnerabilities in technology that might or may not currently be labelled as smart.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you with this point about where the sort of sustainability profession is on this, because a meeting that I was at that unfortunately you couldn't attend because you were doing something far more important, but only one of the 26 of us was very exercised about artificial intelligence, and we finished up agreeing that actually that was the most important thing, and it was the area where there had been the least attention and where we needed to really focus going forwards, rather than this focusing on incumbents and getting potentially trapped in a sort of cul-de-sac of thinking about what exists now rather than what is so front and centre to what we need to be thinking about.
I don't want to come across as a Luddite. I'm sorry to have missed that meeting, but just one example of how artificial intelligence can betray us. I mentioned the ozone hole, and you probably all know that the Nimbus 7 satellite was flying over Antarctic for years, and no one saw the ozone hole, because all the computers were programmed to believe that nothing like that was possible. So what blind spots are we now building into our AI systems? And we do it the whole time without thinking. So immensely exciting, but let's think a little bit too.
Let's be very aware, and let's think about what combination of alertness might be required. So the combination of skills and mindsets to be ready to not just spot the opportunities, but also to identify the risks. So Ram, I don't know if there's anything from your perspective you'd like to highlight on your...
I think you're absolutely right. I think there are... the data scientist is the new superhero, right, in technology.
We love him.
We love those guys. We can't get enough
Not
of them.
far right.
But they have... they're great guys, but I don't think, there's no sort of moral or philosophical boundary to the advancements that they can make in technology. Their challenge is around beating the next big scientific challenge that they see in front of them. And in all my years, I get very excited about technology. I'm not a data scientist, but I love what they do. But more and more in what I do, I come across conversations about this philosophical issue around what we're doing. What does it mean that we own so much data about an individual, from how they consume their energy to where they go, and when you put it all together, you can just really describe their entire life in any way that you want, and security being one of those issues, that your ability to get straight into the heart of somebody's house or a business, or even national infrastructure, if you're controlling energy grids, etc., etc. So there are some big questions that we need to answer, and I don't think we really necessarily have those answers in place yet. We're all, talking to a lot of lawyers about what does it mean in IoT to control national infrastructure that could connect to the cloud, and what could that mean? What would be the impact to a large company owning that kind of infrastructure, running it? So I don't have any fantastic answers around that, other than I agree with your point that I think there are many holes that we need to think about. The one other thing that I've come across is that one way of bringing some level of control back into the skills growth or the change is, I've found that we often talk about AI and IoT as being an IT-driven change, but it's IoT, it's an OT-driven change as well. So the guys that have been controlling this infrastructure, the traditional guys, are an incredibly important part of the equation. So it's not just the data scientists thinking about how they're going to change the world. It's very much a combined dialogue between the guys that operate those machines today and how we can together do that. And they are the ones that put the data scientists to task. And you would have had this in RWE, as Mustafa found when he turned up with the data center guys going, I don't necessarily believe you can do that. So we get a lot of that challenge from the operational guys who want to check and double check that what we're doing is actually doable and it doesn't have big holes around it.
So can I take the panel back for the closing question for this session, which is taking us down some fascinating routes. Can I take us back to the very first keynote that we were lucky to have from Mustafa and what they were able to achieve with Google, and the point you've just made about this, they didn't believe it was possible to begin with. So what happens? What happens if companies, many of the companies in this room, what happens if they don't engage with the disruption? What happens if they stay in a comfort zone of looking at energy efficiency projects and they stay with that marginal approach to we can achieve more by just doing more of the same? What happens if we don't engage? John, can I give that one to you first?
Well, I was thinking as I was preparing for the talk I want to give a little later on about how energy has popped up at the level that we typically operate at, which is C-suite or board level, over the sort of decades that I've worked with business. And the answer is, except for oil shocks and a few strange periods, energy really doesn't get onto the board level agenda unless there's something sort of slightly weird going on. But people in the investment community often say that they look at sustainability as a sort of proxy for good management. And I think in what's coming at us, looking at the way in which companies deal with the energy flows through not just their facilities, but through their supply chains and so on, will be a proxy for the capacity to understand what's potentially coming at us and to respond in an intelligent way. So energy efficiency will always be important. Much of that will be mechanized or done by machine learning or robotic systems or whatever. But the capacity to think about the prosumer and what he or she will want and to deliver that ahead of them even understanding what they want or need, I think that will be a differentiator for a growing number of businesses. Incredibly exciting time for anyone who actually works it out. I don't have the answer.
Incredibly exciting. So for the differentiator, Agamemnon, do you have anything, just a last closing comment?
Yeah, I'd say when we start talking about prosumer, we are starting about him and her. When actually you don't think about your customers as a him and her, you think about these 1,000 customers, these 500, this locality, I work with this area. So actually thinking about people in localities, Londoners think of themselves in boroughs. They're not like I'm a Londoner necessarily. They have higher affiliation with their community. So we started thinking about them in that way. I think that there would be think about the prosumer as communities feeling about themselves. They feel of themselves as a community. You'll get that. And if you don't, because that's the question you ask, if I'm right. If you don't, this is what will happen.
Yeah.
The banking system will collapse because people are sick of being, let's say, screwed over. Yeah. The large supermarkets will have a serious fundamental scrum for business because people are actually coming together and saying, we don't want to buy from there, we want to buy from here. And they have the ability to do that with direct delivery. Ocado is one step away from the supermarkets all taking over. Nothing. They'll be taking over an idea, brand identity. This is the incumbent again saying, how do we keep that market? So you'll have this peer-to-peer lending of energy will be peer-to-peer lending of knowledge. So for all of what we've been working on, with repowering and now with Energy Garden, where it's TfL, it's all of London. We've been saying we're creating energy systems which will generate renewables and a revenue stream to keep things going. But we're doing community gardens. So there's 50 community gardens across London. Right? So what we're trying to do is say, what is important to you? Energy is only one of the things. There's apparently eight factors that they wanted, not 7 sadly, but there was 8 factors that they wanted. And of the 8, energy was only one. Training, health, education, there was all these pieces. So we were trying to see how can we aggregate our offer to the consumer, right? And then them as a whole, not thinking about individuals, but as that community. And if you don't do that, I think that will be the death nail in the coffin because people will just up and away from your business.
Thank you. And I feel that on that note, provocative as it is, what I hope this panel has done is open up a discussion and a debate of the opportunity that's being presented to us and the ability to ride that wave and make it work for you, rather than going with if you don't do this, this will happen. to recognise that we can, going forward, really make some big steps now, and there are many different routes that different companies are following, building on the leadership panel that we had earlier, and moving into your roundtables where you're about to have the chance to discuss what it means for you personally. So I'd like you to join me in thanking our panel in the usual way. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you particularly to Catherine, who's moderated 2 panels beautifully for us today. Thank you. I think the takeaway from that was the data scientist is the new superhero. And if you look at your LinkedIn page and you can't see any data scientists in there, you might just want to go and hang out with Carlos for a bit. We now go into the second roundtable discussions, 40 minutes. Then we join John for the closing keynote, and then we have a drink. So if you should be sitting at your round table. It's the second one on your badge. If you're not on a round table, you can feel free to spot a gap and join one. So enjoy.